Hello everyone, I'm Tania Diggory, founder and director of Karma, a training organisation empowering entrepreneurs, freelancers and business teams to nurture good mental health and well-being. I'm so pleased to be joined by the wonderful Dan Keeley today, an award-winning mental health activist, motivational speaker and the founder and mission director of Are We OK UK. Dan is one of the UK's most collaborative and committed thought leaders, activists and keynote speakers, and he is on a mission to bring the UK together to talk about what really matters most. It's so wonderful to be here with you today, Dan. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, so good to be here, Tania. So good to be here.
Thank you. So please elaborate for us. You have such an empowering story, and I know we're going to get into the details of that today as well. But just give us a little bit more of a background about you, who you are, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, no, thanks. Well, great to be here, Tania. And, again, thanks so much for having me on. You're up to amazing things at the moment. And, this isn't the first time we've jumped on a session like this together. So it's
Absolutely.
so good to be here.
Great. Thank you.
So yeah, no, it's been an amazing journey, really, which has led up to being on this podcast with you now. And I think the one title which I am happy to really go with is a mental health activist. Underneath that, I've been sort of recognized as a a thought leader, campaigner, adventure runner, which we can talk about, but there's a whole plethora of things which I do get labeled with. But really, essentially, I've dedicated my life to one thing, and that is empowering the UK and people around the world to speak up when they're suffering, so that together we can show future generations how it's done. And at the heart of that, as you say, is about really bringing people together to talk about what really matters most. And so the big vision, my big why as to do what I do, is because I believe in a world where the vast majority of us, at least, have the courage, the support and the safe space to speak up when we're struggling. But yeah, it hasn't always been the case. My background was in sports development. I've always been pretty creative. I grew up in East Sussex, and just over the years, I was always looking for an occupation where I could apply, this kind of positive energy that I've always had. My passion for sports and, really people. I've always just wanted to apply myself to different occupations where I do bring people together in different ways. And because of a unique set of experiences that happened to me between 2012 and 2017, which I know we're going to dive into, that's really led up to me being here today. But it's been quite a journey, and just being on conversations like this is what I've dedicated my life to, Tania. This is a safe, supportive space to have these really powerful, courageous conversations about mental well-being. So it lights me up every time I get an opportunity like this. So it's really great to be here.
Amazing, and it's such a pleasure to collaborate and speak with you again. I think we could just talk for ages about this topic, and it's always such a pleasure, and everything you do with such authenticity and from a really heart-centered space. So we're going to really dive into all of that today, and I'm just so excited for all the listeners listening in and just how many minds that you'll impact positively. So thank you. I know that you said you have a lot of labels with what you do, and the mental health activist aspect is the most important part for you, but I really want to talk about all the things that you do, because it really it's so fun to go through this list, and it's so impressive, and I think it's just a real testament to the portfolio career that so many people have these days. It's no longer that we're living in an age where it's just sort of a job for life, and actually multiple streams of income and multiple interests and keeping variety in your life is so important. And I'm sure we'll talk today about why that's important for mental health as well. But I'm just going to share with our listeners the short version of your good self. So this you can get your head around, I'm sure, very straightforwardly. So we have thought leader, mental health activist, and a keynote speaker. Right. The long version of this is a Zoom ninja, which I can totally attest to. Dan has definitely helped me with my Zoom management in the past. Virtual event designer, website designer, podcast host, community builder, adventure runner, alpine ski instructor, an ambassador for many organizations, including Karma, can I just say, snow sport community manager, mental wellbeing influencer, mentor, and mission director and founder of Are We OK UK. Let's all give a massive round of applause to Dan. I mean, that's just such an impressive overview. Tell us a little bit more. How did you get into all of these, I don't even know what to say, all of these amazing
different channels.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing that. and I'm glad you read it out, not me. And by the way, every single one is true. You know, it's been, I mean, it's interesting. Going back to just before you read that out, the thing which came to mind is the fact that I am a father now to Max, who's 1.5 years old. And I think about, you know, him growing up and, you know, at some point he's going to be talking about career paths and all the rest of it. And I always think, you know, some of the advice, I've even said it to my younger cousins and my nieces and nephews, is, you know, what problem are you going to apply yourself to in the world? You know, because I think when you can find that deep rooted why as to do what you do, then, you know, the magic can happen after that. And I've always been a horizon person. I've never known exactly what I wanted to do when I grew up, you know, from a young age. My brother, by contrast, was a Red Arrows pilot, and from the, you know, the age of 6 years old, that's exactly what he wanted to do, right? Yeah. You know, I'm more of a horizon person where, you know, I know the direction I want to head in, and for me, I know the impact I want to have on the world. So, you know, I start with the why, and that is really now, you know, more so than ever, is just to, you know, empower others to speak up when they're struggling. But certainly the ones with the sports angle, yeah, you know, my whole professional background was in sport and sports development. You know, I went skiing as a kid, and, you know, just within 2 minutes of being in the mountains, knew that I was going to become a skiing instructor one day. And I did. You know, that was something under my skin from a very young age. And again, when you think about that, it's bringing people together on the mountains to enjoy that environment in a safe and fun way. So that was a sort of a passion path that I pursued, which led to me being then a community manager in the snow sports industry. So I was very lucky since 2012 to be part of an amazing team that changes the lives of underprivileged inner city young people by taking them away from the inner city environment and away to the mountains and changing their lives with skiing, snowboarding, life skills, qualifications, vocational opportunities. So just an amazing privilege to apply this passion for snow sports and, again, people and social impact, and change the lives of these young people. So that's where, you know, my background in sports development has been. But again, it's really what happened in 2012 which starts to frame why we're having this conversation today. And that you know, began this 5-year chapter where I did have a huge battle with bipolar disorder, which I was to be diagnosed in the summer of 2012. But yeah, you know, just hearing you read that list, you know, I always start with yes. And again, you know, all the recent stuff with the virtual events, and, you know, you said about being a Zoom ninja, but that's because, again, you know, we've seen some huge, you know, sort of fundraising opportunities with that same charity that I still do some work with. You know, so we had to dive into the world of virtual events, and that's been amazing. But again, applying that to always going back to my why, bringing people together to talk about what matters most. That's what I've done with Are We Okay as a brand, which we can go into as well. So yeah, always starting with yes, always going back to, you know, what lights me up the most, and that is applying myself and being in service to other people. And yeah, just using that, you know, passion for sport and creativity where I can. But yeah, who knows? We could be speaking in 5 years' time, and that could be completely different.
Who knows? I know you're always up to so many amazing things. So yeah, we'll see where everything leads for you, Dan. But, you know, we'll talk as well about the, you know, incredible charity support that you offer and all the causes that you've supported. But also with the say yes first philosophy. I do love that. And you're an ambassador for something called the Yes Tribe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Yes Tribe. Yeah, the Yes Tribe is, anybody can check it out on Facebook right now if you just punch in the Yes Tribe or sayyesmore.com. An amazing community. I think there's over 14,000 people now around the world. It's an online community that tries to get together as much as possible, which is all about saying yes more as a mantra, getting outside, supporting each other to say yes to that big passion project or that next big adventure. You know, that's what the Yes Tribe is all about. And again, I think that, yeah, just aligns really well with me. You know, I'm always, you know, if there's something that aligns with my long-term vision that I have for my life and the impact I want to have on people, I'm always going to start with yes, and then, you know, see where it takes me. And that's obviously what's led up to us, you know, doing a lot of stuff together, Tania as well. And again, you know, Karma's values, you know, align so well with mine. And immediately, you know, when you asked me to be part of the team as an ambassador, it was a no-brainer.
Absolutely.
But yeah, say yes more. You've got to check it out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you know, and we're so pleased to have you on board as an ambassador for us as well. You know, and advocating for the message of positive mental health and how to nurture your mental well-being and prevent burnout. So, you know, really excited to see what we, you know, develop together in the projects for Karma as well. So let's dig down a bit deeper into your personal story. So I think it's so powerful, and one of the things I really admire so much about your story is the fact that you are a shining example of somebody who has overcome such adversity. So anyone listening to this, whatever you're going through at the moment in your life, if you're going through any struggles, holding on to hope is absolutely paramount in whatever situation that you're in, because there is always hope with whatever you're going through, even if it feels really bleak at the time. So can you please tell us your journey, your story as to how you got to where you are today as a mental health activist for positive mental health and supporting and nurturing your well-being?
Yeah, definitely. And don't let me forget, Tanya, an amazing quote from Winston Churchill, which
Okay,
I just had in mind when you were saying that, because, you know, just with the hope aspect. So we're definitely going to come back to that.
brilliant.
It has been quite a journey. And I've got to say from the start, you know, I'm so lucky for the people that I have in my life, which, which feed into why I'm in a really good place today, and being able to have these you know, types of discussions so confidently, I guess, is because of the people that I have in my life. But yeah, so I think, you know, jumping straight into the crux of the story, it was actually in 2012 when, you know, I did start at the snow sports charity I mentioned, where it's almost like over the years I put so much pressure on myself to find an occupation where I could really channel, you know, this passion for creativity and sports development and social impact, you know. And I did put so much pressure on myself over the years, but it was in 2012 where I got offered this amazing position. And it's almost like, because of the pressure, that huge pressure that I put on myself over the years, it felt like I'd crossed this finish line, like this huge weight got lifted. And with that, my energy started to really start to dial up. And so really over the course of those 6 months between January and June in 2012, this energy and this dopamine and this adrenaline and these just creative ideas and these grandiose thoughts were just dialing up and up and up and up. And, you know, I'm really getting to the crux of it. In that summer, we booked a 2-week holiday out to Italy. Everybody was saying, Dan, just please head out there, turn off your phone, relax, stop, just slow down, because, you know, it was just I was just going at 200 miles an hour for 6 months. And I really couldn't. You know, it's like my foot was firmly planted on the accelerator. And I probably, you know, skipped a few chapters with this, but, you know, really at the height of this, I believed I was the chosen one. I believed that I was being put on this planet to force the world to slow down and follow their hearts, which is, of course, super ironic given the fact that I was going at 200 miles an hour. But, you know, effectively, it's almost like I had the world's pain in my heart, and I had to respond to that in the biggest, most grandiose way I could possibly think of. And at that time, it was actually stopping traffic on the middle of a motorway in Italy in the height of a full-scale psychotic episode. By definition, after 6 months of all of this dialing up and up and up and up, you know, believing I was the next big social entrepreneur, I was going to be the one that was going to ease all the world's suffering, believing to my core that I'd been put on the planet to ease as much of that pain that I feel and still feel in a different way, really, but on a day-by-day basis. You know, I ended up on that motorway, backing up the traffic in northern Italy for 5-10 miles. And as I say, it was the definition of losing my mind, just because I'd pushed myself so hard. And of course, you know, what came next was the psychiatric wards, which was a pretty confusing, challenging experience over the next 6 weeks, both in Italy and in the UK.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing that really strikes me about that is with psychiatric wards, and, you know, when we're thinking about sort of mental health in general, and there's still this stigma attached to mental health. And, you know, a lot of people will go to that vision of psychiatric wards, of people being in like a really, you know, really challenging state of mental health and needing that level of care. But actually, you know, you are, just as everybody is on this earth, we're all born, you know, fresh, unique, completely individual. It's, you know, life circumstances and challenges that come our way that, you know, develop and evolve, and we see where things go. But mental health, and especially poor mental health, does not define you as a human being. You know, it's an experience that you're having, and what you're describing there is when you ended up in the psychiatric ward, that is part of your story. You know, but it's not the entirety of your story. And I think that with the stigma, it still lends itself to that visual. That's why we're, you know, running the Goodmentalhealthfestival, for example, like to try and get people thinking about mental health from a really broad perspective, because mental health is a fluctuation. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it's always a journey, you know, and we're all on that journey together, you know. And I do, you know, I had to really consider that phrase, the mental adventure, but, you know, I do believe we're all on this mental adventure together. And when I say that, you know, it is to do with our mentality, you know, I'm not saying everybody, obviously, you know, that type of, you know, terminology, but we are all on this adventure together, and it is a journey, you know, and there are ups and downs through this whole journey through life. But absolutely, you know, and again, that's one of the keynote talks, which we'll get to, is, you know, is the fact that we are all on this journey together. It doesn't matter who we are, whether we're Boris Johnson or Beyonce, you know, every single one of us has pressures that we all face on a daily basis. And so hopefully, you know, more conversations like this can play its part just to release that valve, to say it's okay to be a bit vulnerable, and to say we're not doing okay at times. But yeah, absolutely. And you know, there is something to add to the story, and I'm more than happy to do so in certain spaces, and more happy to than others. But as a child, I was sexually abused. And so, you know, yes, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, you know, 6 weeks after being in the psychiatric wards. But effectively, you know, it's almost like oversimplifying it by saying that I just worked too hard and I just pushed my mind to the limit over those 6 months. That's absolutely true. But there was obviously this inner stress that had to manifest somehow. And even that in its own right was really interesting. And I haven't dived deeper into this with a psychologist, but, you know, my body only let me remember what had happened to me as a child when it was strong enough to deal with it. And so it was actually when I was at university at the age of 21 when I suddenly had this light bulb moment that I'd been sexually abused as a kid. And so, you know, from the age of 21 leading up to that summer in 2012, you know, over the course of those 3, 4, 5 years, it was, you know, you could see that things were a bit rocky. And so I think them, you know, being offered that incredible position at the charity, and then really just, you know, this energy just had to come out of my system somehow. So, you know, there's a number of things which played its part to being in the psychiatric wards. But I'm really happy, you know, diving into what it was like to be in a psychiatric ward.
It's totally your call. I'd love to hear. Absolutely. Because it's not as clear cut, is it, as people think? It's
not
it's
at
so
all.
much more than that.
Not at all. No, and I rarely go there because I rarely have time for it. But that's, you know, why I love you as a podcast host, Tania. But you know, it's really confusing. You know, effectively, you know, my mental state was going at 200 miles an hour. I believed I was the chosen one. I had so much conviction in, you know, my ideas and my, you know, my you know, clarity of thought, and every word that was leaving my lips. I was so confident that this was going to change the world and ease so much of the suffering that's going on out there. And then suddenly I was waking up after 12, 13 hours of, you know, because I was basically strapped down to a bed and being pumped full of drugs, you know, day in, day out, just to make me slow down and eat and sleep and repeat. So, and then suddenly I'll be waking up, and you can imagine that it's almost like my gearbox was broken, because, you know, in some senses I'm like, come on, let's go. You know, we've got change to make. But at the same time, I was just completely exhausted, and these drugs were starting to kick in, you know, so I felt incredibly dopey at the same time. But, you know, but the facilities in Italy, so I was there for 2.5 weeks in the psychiatric ward there. And you know, I remember, you know, the facilities and the staff were amazing. They were so welcoming, and they looked after me despite the language barrier. I was really fortunate, you know, to have my mother and my wife Georgie with me as well. You know, so the staff and the facility, it was a really, you know, it was almost, I wouldn't say it was like a hotel by any means, but it was a really fresh environment to be in. And I think they really got the kind of, you know, human-centered person care, where it's like, if we create a green space, if we create, you know, a nice, bright, minimalist green space for you to recover in, then great things can happen. In contrast to that, when I was escorted back to the UK with 2 nurses from Britain who had to fly out and escort me and my family back because I wasn't in a safe space to fly, you know, just ourselves. I was then in the Maudsley Hospital in South London, and by contrast, it was dark, it was damp, it was scary, it was just debilitating. It was a really dark grey environment to be in, and I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. I remember all the, you know, the seating was just so plastic, and there was no space to breathe and to go outside, and that's supposed to be one of the most, you know, high profile you know, NHS provided psychiatric wards in the UK, and that was a really scary experience. And again, being in South London, there were, you know, various issues with you know, drug abuse and alcoholism, with people coming in and out the ward the whole time. You know, it's just so really scary 2.5 weeks really back in the UK before being discharged with the diagnosis. But yeah, you know, it's something which we don't hear about too often in society, and what it's like to be on a psychiatric ward. But certainly, as you said, you know, I'd say, you know, a high percentage of the people in there were just normal people going about their daily lives beforehand, and just through unique sets of circumstance, they ended up in the psychiatric wards with me there. But yeah, you know, just quite a defining moment really.
Yeah.
And you know, something that none of our family ever expected. There was no history of mental health conditions in our family at all, and so this all really just came out of the blue. And of course, you know, I was still in that sort of state of full scale mania versus these new drugs kicking in. So it was just a really confusing 6 weeks really. And then that really started the second half of 2012.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for choosing to share that with us. I always feel it's such an honor, you know, when anyone I interview chooses to share something really personal. But then, you know, that's just reflective of you and your nature, Dan. I mean, you know, you talk about the power of vulnerability, which we'll go into in more detail a bit later, but, you know, and also the power of men's mental health, because, you know, as far as we have come along in understanding more awareness around mental health in general, like I said earlier, there still is that stigma, and there still is this issue, you know, with male suicide, with a lot of men struggling, you know, with their own mental health, and the view of having to be strong and having to have it all together and be the provider and all of these things. But again, that's old notions back in a time when there wasn't any basically awareness about mental health, and so we just saw what we saw on the outside and made our assumptions. I know it's not as simple as that, but I'm giving a very simplified version. But you know, you've just demonstrated we have our lifespans. You know, it's not just a case of if someone ends up in a psychiatric ward, you know, that's the defining moment of who they are. It's like there's a whole set of circumstances that have led to that point. You know? So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
And you recovered. So let's talk about your recovery, and what was it like for you in the months and years following that?
Yeah, of course. Well, the next 6 months were pretty tough. You know, I wasn't working. You know, I didn't want to see anybody. I was really debilitated, and it was almost like that same massive energy that I'd been pumping out over those 6 months prior were just coming right back at me. And it almost felt like I was being pushed into my mattress on a daily basis and being pulled at the same time for 6 months. And you know, curtains closed, completely disconnected, didn't want to see anybody. There was an element of embarrassment and shame and guilt. You know, the effects I was having on my family just had to surround me with this amazing amount of love and care. And actually, that's one of the key things, you know, which I share so often, is that I was made to feel safe, seen, and soothed. You know, there was always somebody there to listen to me when I wanted to speak up about, you know, the challenges that I just faced. You know, I think people around me did an amazing job of not necessarily trying to fix me, unless I explicitly asked for what would you do. You know, I didn't really get the sense of people trying to fix me, which was amazing. I just had a lot of patience and empathy and warmth and love and compassion. And I think, fortunately, obviously, I was critical. So, you know, I had counselling pretty much twice a week. Yeah, you know, there was one moment where, you know, I did go to grab the car keys to take a drive and to have a look at a particular bridge. You know, I'm just so lucky that I had people in my life around me who helped to stop that happen, including hiding the car keys that particular day. So, you know, it was a really challenging 6 months. It really was. And, you know, for me, and again, this is something I share quite often, is you just never know what's around the corner in terms of something that might just spark that positive journey of recovery. And for me, it came down actually to a moment in the supermarket, because it was, you know, December 2012, where, you know, 6 months of, again, I really mean it, not going out in public, not seeing anybody. And then, you know, Georgie, my wife, was like, look, even if you can just walk 10 minutes today to grab some milk and some cereal, you know, I'll be so proud of you. Even if you know, if you just achieve that, that is a huge accomplishment. And so, you know, I remember that day, it was snooze, 11 a.m, you know, midday, 1 p.m, 2 p.m, 3 p.m, guilt tripped myself into, you know, freshening up and taking the walk, picked up the milk, no problem, turned into aisle 14 of the cereal aisle. I remember it as clear as day. And I completely froze, because I was so fearful of making the wrong decision with this £2 coin over what cereal to buy. And it came down to the smallest sort of, you know, tiny example that I just couldn't function. I couldn't make the simplest of choices. And if I couldn't make the decision with this £2 coin, then how on earth am I going to function in life? So this is a long-winded answer, but effectively that was my moment after 45 minutes of basically feeling like I was crying internally in that supermarket, walking home thinking, I've got to start again. I've got to completely strip it back and start again. And so that's really what started and kick-started my journey of recovery, because I just knew that I had to declutter, and I decluttered everything in my physical space around me that wasn't either beautiful or adding value in different ways. So I had a much simpler, quieter environment to recover in. And then it started going down to commitments that I knew were just getting in the way of putting myself first and my mental well-being first. You know, even relationships that maybe just, you know, gone in different directions. So just just, you know, having the confidence just to let those go and just focus on my, you know, my loved ones and those people that I really love the most. You know, so I started this process of decluttering, which I later discovered was minimalism, you know, minimizing life's excess to focus on what really matters most: our health, relationships, passions, growth, contributing to other people's lives. And of course, this then started to feed into speaking openly about that, because you know, it's really started to work for me. You know, I really simplified my life and just focused on a couple of things a day, nothing more. And of course, when I do start then going back into the workplace or just socializing again, you know, running with various groups, naturally, you know, there are these points where people ask you about your experiences. And, you know, I remember feeling there was no point in hiding this pretty unique set of, you know, circumstances that I've been through 2012. You know, I'd always been really expressive and open anyway. So people knew that, you know, something had changed. So I just started speaking openly. You know, it felt like more of a burden to hide anything. So I just said, yeah, exactly like you said, Tania, you know, these things can happen to anybody. So I just started speaking openly about the journey with bipolar, but secondly, what I was doing personally to live a much sort of more intentional lifestyle with my mental well-being first and foremost. And so the combination of those two things really kickstarted this 5-year journey of recovery from January 2013 up until now. You know, I'm still on that journey, you know, as we're speaking. But as you know, through 2013, 14, 15, 16, over those 5 years, which led up to 2017, I knew I had to do something pretty sizable to share my story on a massive scale.
This your big run that you're about to tell us about. Epic, absolutely epic. Yes, please do continue.
Yeah. So I mean, at its heart, you know, throughout that whole journey, the three most incredible things that started to happen every time I spoke up about my story was that I felt much lighter. You know, every time I shared my story, I felt much lighter. It's almost like it processed what I'd been through. It's almost like rewriting the story slightly as to what I'd been through. I started building an amazing dream team around me. So, you know, I had even more people that would just keep an eye on me effectively if my mood was elevating or going the other way. But the most amazing thing was just giving permission for other people to speak up about what they were going through. You know, and that's the crux of it, is simply by sharing my story and being open about my experiences, 9 times out of 10, I'd then get a follow-up from somebody saying, actually, I've got this thing going on, and my brother's struggling with this, or my auntie's got this thing going on, can we just have a conversation about it? And so it was really harnessing that, which led up to taking on this huge adventure challenge in 2017. And really this quote, which I mentioned earlier about this quote from Winston Churchill, is, you know, bringing that whole story together and, you know, harnessing my experiences to channel into a hugely positive project, which I'll chat about in just a second. Is Churchill says, you know, when suffering finds meaning, it ceases to be suffering. So when we can apply the meaning, or when we can draw out the meaning from our experiences that we've been through, then typically the suffering can at least ease, because we realize actually perhaps these things were maybe meant to happen, or at least, you know, the gifts that I've been imparted with this compassion and empathy for other people, listening skills, you know, really holding a conversation. You know, so often these challenges that we all face on a daily basis can teach us so much. And so it was all of those things combined, which I knew I had to do something really big. So I couldn't think of a better way to share my story on a national scale than by returning to Italy 5 years on from that moment. But this time, instead of standing on the middle of a motorway, I was going to run from the Colosseum all the way back to the London Eye over 65 majestic days.
Of course you did. And that's 1,250 miles, is that right?
Yeah, 1,250. Yeah.
Wow. And you raised a lot of money for a very, very important cause, didn't you?
Yeah, so the Campaign Against Living Miserably, CALM, you know, they're the UK's leading charity, you know, dedicated to preventing male suicide. And I think them, along with the Movember Foundation, you know, they're really trailblazing that whole discussion about men's mental health. So everybody really should check in with their work, male or female, doesn't matter, but they're just a trailblazing charity who really show other charities how it's done. But yeah, that was something really close to my heart for the reasons we touched on, is that I saw a high percentage of males not feeling as comfortable to open up as perhaps I did. And so I really just battled with that myself. I was like, you know, why is that? And I think it's purely a case of leadership. You know, you need leaders, you need people at the front to just simply speak from the heart about their experiences, which just paves the way for other men particularly to speak openly about their experiences. And so that's what Rome Time was all about. You know, I gave myself a year to get ready, made sure my medication was in the right place. You know, it's really about getting my mind in the right place as well as my body. But it was just a beautiful Adventure, yeah. So 12 months to get ready for the whole thing. I set off on the 25th of August at 7 a.m. with this golden sunrise through the arches of the Colosseum. And then I just had 65 days ahead of me to put one foot in front of the other, to share my story from start to finish. It wasn't all plain sailing. I remember on day 15, I was running way too hard too soon. You know, my mileage was up to something like 30 miles when I only needed to average 20 miles a day. And so I was just giving it everything. So even then, you know, my dream team were checking in on me on WhatsApp, which was amazing. And they said, Dan, look, we're worried about you. You know, we think we need to just slow down and remember again what matters most at the end of this. So, you know, again, just slowing down, practicing what I preach, putting myself first, you know, just taking a pause and not worrying about the big picture, just doing what's in front of me, simplifying again. And then that really led into, you know, again, the success of the adventure. But yeah, winding my way up through Tuscany and up towards the Alps, up and over, you know, 2 days up, 2 days down over the Alps, running up towards Paris, a 54-mile day running into Paris, which was incredible. A couple of rest days leading up to the coast, across the channel, a few laps on the ferry on the way over. And then 5 days leading up to the London Eye. And then it was just this huge, you know, and that, you know, I still relive that moment at the London Eye. There were 150 people plus waiting for me. The red, white and blue was out, the champagne was out, but it wasn't just a celebration of the run. You know, it wasn't about that. It was about everything we've just touched on so far. You know, the power of vulnerability, putting yourself first when we need to, you know, surrounding yourself with other people. So yeah, just I could relive that moment time and time again.
Oh, you describe it so vividly as well. I feel like I was there literally as you're explaining it. I'm so glad to hear that you said you had a couple rest days in between all of that. That sounds like, yeah, an incredible adventure. But it sounds like you've been very, very sporty throughout your life. So I suppose that must have helped in some way. But still, even that, you know, you hear about people doing, you know, incredible, you know, really long marathons and, you know, triathlons and all these things, and, you know, running from Rome to home like you have, and even the most fit athletic people still have to really train their bodies and their mindset, right, to manage that kind of task.
Yeah, totally. And you know, I think and again it went back to my deep sense of why. You know, my fuel was that at the time, you know, and it's still very much the case today, but 12 men a day take their life. You know, it's huge. Those statistics are so alarming. We just had the stats in 2019. You know, 5,600 registered suicides in 2019, and 2/3 of those are male. You know, it is still the highest killer of men under the age of 45. But 12 men a day, Tania, won't be here tomorrow. And that really pains me every day now. And so I was waking up to that, you know, from the start to finish, I was waking up with that fuel to drive what I did. And again, anybody can punch in Rome Time on YouTube and watch the highlight videos from start to finish. I recorded the whole thing on my GoPro, and you know, I look like a kid. I look like a 12-year-old kid in a candy shop. I was just so elated to be out there. But that passion for being out there was absolutely fueled by, you know, the sense of pain, which again so many men and, you know, females as well absolutely face on a daily basis, and there's still so much work to be done. And so that was my personal fuel. So, you know, I think anybody takes on a big adventure challenge, or you know, triathlons or ultra marathons, you know, whatever, you know, I think they've all pretty much got fascinating stories, I would say, especially in the adventure running community. Everybody's got a story, and certainly for me, I had a really deep you know, sense of purpose, which fueled the whole adventure. And it's really what fueled, you know, the creation of Are We Okay as a social enterprise, and it fuels being on this conversation with you now. And I always say, you know, having this conversation with you now for me means just as much as being out there running every day. It really does, because, you know, there is still so much work to be done. Again, 12 men will not be here tomorrow who wake up this morning, and that still is still absolutely my North Star as to why I do what I do.
Well, it leaves you speechless, really, doesn't it? I mean, you know, I do a lot of research around mental health as well in the work that I do, as you know, and it still gets me every time. It's not like that will ever become a thing that should be okay. It needs to be dealt with, and having people like yourself as well who are really flying the flag, you know, for men's mental health and for supporting men in speaking up, in being okay to not be okay, and just get the support that they need, and just to be okay with sharing a bit of vulnerability. It all makes a massive difference. And I can just picture in my mind, you will have saved loads of lives through what you've done so far. You will have. You've spread so much awareness in doing what you do in so many ways. And I think what really strikes me from what you've said, love that quote by Churchill, by the way. It's very powerful. But it's that you keep coming back to your why. And I think this is one of the most powerful things about your story and what you do today, Dan, is that everything and your whole recovery and your whole, journey through hope, even when it felt the most bleakest of times for you, is you anchored your state to what is your why. And even if you're in a really dark place, knowing what your why is sounds like that's what it really is that keeps you going, So what would you say is a good starting point for somebody really anchoring into what is their why and finding their purpose?
Yeah, I mean, Simon Sinek is an amazing author, thought leader, TED speaker, and that everybody should at least begin exploring his work. Which, he's got this incredible book, Start With Why, which I'd recommend to anybody reading. I mean, I was lucky in the sense that mine came very naturally because of the experiences that I went through. I've had to do a lot of work to fine tune the mission statement effectively of why I do what I do. So it's taken me a lot of time to really fine tune now what I've dedicated my life to, and we can talk about Are We Okay as well very shortly. But again, for me it's about taking that time for yourself and really listening to what's going on inside. And again, that quote from Churchill is something which I think about every single day. And the reason I love that quote so much: when suffering finds meaning, it ceases to be suffering, or it can, at least ease the suffering that we go through. So again, I came across that quote in 2012, towards the back end of 2012, and it was, that was almost, it almost came into my life at the right time. Because I started at least thinking, perhaps there are some positives from this whole journey that I've been through. And again, now, 7 years on from that whole chapter, it's really led to some remarkable places. But I think it is about really reconnecting to what's really going on inside. I mean, it's different for everybody. Simon Sinek, Start With Why, is incredible, just to kind of at least help you take the steps to figuring out why you do what you do, how you're going to do it, and what you're actually going to be doing on a daily basis. Again, I can frame that with Are We Okay in just a second. But certainly through that journey, if there is a lack of hope and optimism and positivity in our own lives, then I do believe being in service to other people can absolutely be one of the most powerful things to nurture positive mental well-being. When we live a life of service and meaning, that for me is a life worth living. And we all have one life. I would say as well, Tanya, one of the exercises I did through this journey is sit down with my 100-year-old self. And so again, during that whole journey of recovery, I came across a quote by Steve Jobs, which is, we can only join the dots looking backwards, not looking forward. So in our daily lives, we're all moving forwards day by day by day by day, but it's when we take the time to go to the end and look backwards on our lives, so looking at our lives retrospectively, is when the bigger picture can evolve. And so for me, having that conversation with your 100-year-old self, say, Dan, look at the life you've lived, look at the impacts you've had on other people, the people you've surrounded yourself with, the adventures you've had, and having that celebratory conversation with your 100-year-old self, that was a really remarkable tool for me to at least almost draw a line on my experiences to date, and then find the meaning through all of those experiences, looking at my skills and my passion for sport, creativity, all of that stuff, and then channeling it into effectively a life of purpose. But yeah, certainly, Start With Why by Simon Sinek is an amazing starting place. And, I do believe that, being in service to other people can be hugely beneficial for, our own mental well-being when we've got the strength, obviously, and the energy to do it. It's not always easy.
Absolutely. And, thank you for referencing, such great leaders so far in this conversation as well, like Brené Brown, Simon Sinek. Absolutely came to mind as well for me when you were talking about vulnerability and starting with why. And, I think it's so giving. I find, when a speaker is not only sharing their own ethos, their own experience, and we're taking such value from what you're saying today, but also just giving those extra resources for people to walk away and look into even further is great. So thank you for those references too. Let's talk about your journey to founding and directing and leading the Are We Okay UK mission. And that's a hashtag in front as well, isn't it? Hashtag Are We Okay UK, if anyone's going to research it. So yes, please do. So you've been on this incredible adventure, the ups, the downs, the highs, lows, and you've found so much meaning in your life and what really matters most to you, and you helping others to find what really matters most for them too. So incredible mission. So what led you to Are We Okay UK?
Yeah. So, I remember distinctly being north of Paris on the adventure. So again, going back to 2017, I was getting towards the end of the adventure. I was really thinking, what's next? I wanted Rome Time really to draw a line on that 5-year journey and to start a brand new chapter in my life at the age of 20. No, hold on. Oh my God, I can't do the maths now. 32. There we go. So, this brand new chapter was going to start where I knew I'd be called upon to share my story a lot more so, but I knew that my voice and my message would only go so far. And at the same time, I was thinking, if I were to take on another big running adventure, what would it be? And I came up with the idea of running a lap of the UK. So effectively, Rome Time was my journey. It was my story. It was my journey of recovery and all the things we just mentioned. But what if there was another big adventure challenge to share other people's stories? And so I'd be lying if I said I still haven't got some big plans to run a lap of the UK, and to use that as a 365-day platform to share other people's stories, again, to normalize all the stuff that we've been speaking about. What would it be called? The Are We Okay UK tour. And so that's where the brand came from. But of course I couldn't just take off. At the same time, I have become a father, as you know, 15 months ago. So there are certain factors I've got to consider, but the brand and the mission, it just really lit up this light bulb again in my life. So, again, really starting with yes, thinking, okay, where could I take this? And so I did found a social enterprise now under the name of Are We Okay UK. And it's really, as you say, it's taken a bit of time to get there, but at its heart is bringing people together to talk about what really matters most. So, I've hosted premium escape events. So these are events which are completely disconnected from anywhere else, in remote settings where we really have powerful conversations over the course of the day, maybe bringing some life coaches, some powerful speakers, some great food and drink. So it started with this premium event, just to test, the brand concept, which led into the podcast, and then these Are We Okay live online discussions. But the big vision now, with absolute clarity, the big North Star is actually taking a lot of inspiration from Parkrun, with their free, fully inclusive, accessible 5K runs on a Saturday morning. And so if you drop the running aspects, but it's been paining me that in so many communities, certainly across the UK, a lot of people don't, for me, seems like there's a safe, supportive space where you can go to have regular conversations about whether it's your mental health or just the pressures that we all face on a daily basis. So wouldn't it be amazing if in 10, 20, 50 years time, every single community across the UK knew, let's say every Wednesday evening, there were between these 4 power flags, maybe with a Bluetooth speaker on, some fairy lights. It was a safe and supportive, stigma-free space to come together to talk about what really matters most as a community. And then this goes into the work of Johan Hari, which is about the social connection. His work is just incredible. And one of the key pillars why he believes there's a huge rise of mental health conditions and loneliness around the world is the fact that we've disbanded our tribes, from what we used to do, where it takes a village to raise a child and all the rest of it. So, so many of us are between our 4 walls on our screens a lot of the time. So it kind of lends itself very well to that, to get people back out their houses, whether it's every week or every other week, to bring communities together to talk about what really matters most and to create safe and supportive spaces where we can have courageous conversations. So obviously over the past 6 months of COVID, it's taken a bit of a hit in terms of the physical spaces outside, but we've been doing a lot of stuff online. And it's a lifelong mission that I've dedicated myself to, a lot of the stuff that I do personally. But it's a pretty cool brand that I'm pretty proud of, and let's see where it goes.
Oh, it's definitely a brand to be proud of. And, I was very honored to be involved in the first retreat that you ran for Are We Okay UK. And, I can confidently say the energy in that room was phenomenal. And everybody who, came along, everyone that spoke, there was just such this very special openness that you don't often find, on a daily basis. For some people at all, so you could tell how much it really meant for the people there attending to find that space to just be.
I've got to say as well, for everyone listening to this, but Tania is world class at holding these powerful conversations as well. And I needed you on the day. You saw that. You were right there next to me. You were my wingman, right?
Oh, it's a pleasure. But this is about you. It's not about me. But thank you. That's very kind of you to say. And I think that's, one of the reasons we connect so well, Dan, is because we're both very, very passionate about this. We're both passionate about holding the space for people to have meaningful conversations, to be themselves, to not struggle alone, because we're social in nature. As human beings, we need one another. We thrive on connecting with other people. Like you say, if we spend too long in isolation or alone or just on our phones and devices, naturally we may feel the decline in our mental health. And this goes back to what we were saying earlier about the fluctuation. It's like mental health is the same as your physical health, your emotional health. It fluctuates depending on your experiences of life at any given time, right?
Certainly.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. And and again, with those spaces, I did hold a couple of physical meetups here in Sevenoaks in Kent just to test the template with those Wednesday meetups. But I actually tried to stay clear from this as a mental health meetup. This is literally 4 flags, and between these 4 flags, again with a bit of background music and fairy lights, just a bit of ambience.
Always fairy lights.
Yeah, you've got to have the fairy lights. But it's just a safe, supportive space to talk about what matters most, because what matters most to you will be completely different to what matters most to me. And actually, I was expecting Tania to try and take a lot of inspiration from you as a facilitator in holding these spaces, i.e. I was expecting to have to speak a lot at these events, but I didn't. And within 2 minutes, these 5 complete strangers turned up at the first meetup, and within 2 minutes, we were just speaking freely about the pressures that we all face on a daily basis. And it was incredible. It was just such a beautiful, simple space. So really, the Wednesday meetups are really taking the essence of what we created with the Premium Escape events. But what matters most to you will be completely different from what matters most to me. And for some, it's just motherhood, fatherhood, pressures with work, whatever. But, the more that we can come together and support each other and look out for the people to the left and right of us, that's certainly the big society vision that I committed my life to, I guess.
Oh, it's amazing. It's such an incredible mission. And I know it's going to happen. I know it will, because, you've proven time and time again, when you set your mind and your heart to something, you do achieve it. So this will happen, pandemic or no pandemic, you will still keep developing it. And in whatever form it takes, in whatever shape, it will develop and grow to be what you picture it to be. And I think that's so important about those just real honest conversations, because, we hold different stresses going on in our lives on a day-to-day basis, and it's different for everyone, like you said before. But sometimes if there's a build-up of lots of little things that actually at the time you don't think of it as a big deal, you're like, oh, it's just a bit of stress here, it's a bit of stress there, but it starts building and building. And there's this incredible story I read once actually about this woman, this facilitator, who was holding up a glass of water, and she said, how heavy do you think this glass is? And people were trying to think of the ounces and being all technical about it, and she was like, if you think about it, if you hold it for like a minute, you won't feel any weight. If you hold it for an hour, your arm will start to feel like it's really aching, and it will feel the pain and will bear the weight of that glass. You hold it for a day, it will become paralyzed. And it's this philosophy of, put down the glass, like don't keep holding on to all of these stresses building and building. It's like, that's what we do with stress. We can allow it to just build, and we hold on to it. And the longer we hold on to it, the more it weighs us down, and the more it can feel paralyzing. And that's when you lead to burnout, exhaustion, So I just found that a really powerful analogy, something that always stayed with me. But
I love that.
Yeah, it's very powerful, isn't it? But I really love what you said. I wrote it down actually, having a safe, supportive, stigma-free space. I think that could be a slogan. It's very powerful.
Might use it for the next one.
So tell us a little bit about your keynote talks, Dan. So we've gotten to know you, and you've shared some, really, really open, honest aspects of your life to date. So thank you so much for that. So when it came to delivering keynote talks, number one, what was that like for you? Because stepping into the speaking space isn't easy, holding a space for a lot of people in a room, and sharing a vulnerable story to top that off. You mentioned the mental adventure earlier as your keynote talk. So tell us more about what this whole experience was like.
Yeah, thanks. Well, again, it's a crazy journey which led into this, and I think it was 2 weeks after I finished the adventure back in 2017, I got asked to speak at the National Running Show. So I spoke at the National Running Show, and there was a nurse there from NHS Trust up in Derby, and said we do have these days where we talk about vulnerability and compassion and empathy. And again, for a lot of the stuff we touched on, she saw that I was a good fit, and I couldn't believe it. I got off this speaking gig up in Derby with this NHS Trust, and it blew my mind that this was even a thing. I didn't really know that the profession of speaking was you know, a legit career
Yeah,
path.
totally.
And again, this was just, you know, again, goes back to the horizon thing. So, you know, again, you know, just starting with, yes, I finished Rome to Home, and people were finding value again in what I was sharing. And it really, I think what was amazing when I got asked to speak for that first ever gig back in 2017 was because it goes back to that why, that deep why. And so that's what I said about being on this podcast, whether it's being on this conversation with you now, speaking from stage, or running 1,250 miles, it is all fueled by really the suffering that's going on out there, and knowing that these words can really play its part to at least ease a bit of that suffering today. And if it's done that, then that's an amazing thing. So the speaking has become something I'm deeply passionate about, for sure. You know, all shapes and sizes, with schools, universities, corporate organizations, festivals, and you know, and every audience is different, and every space is different, but it always goes back to, you know, some really key themes: the power of vulnerability, the power of putting ourselves first when we need to. We talk about the mental adventure, so the fact that we are all on this journey together. Obviously, if we have to roll deeper, then I'm happy to with simplicity and minimalism, or men's mental health. You know, so really all I'm doing, Tania, every single day is sharing my story and really picking out and fine-tuning those key lessons that I've learned along the way. And, you know, fortunately, with my background in sport and sports development, where I've had to present ultimately to audiences, whether that's skiing instructing, or, you know, being the president of the lacrosse club at university, or whatever that is, you know, I've always had that, I don't know, gift, ability to present to an audience. So, you know, just fusing that together, and again, going back to my why, you know, and I know that this podcast is going to be hopefully playing its part to ease a little bit of suffering for people going on out there. So yeah, the keynote talks is something I'm deeply passionate about. Obviously, it's been a bit different over the past 6 months with COVID, where I haven't been able to do it in person. In fact, I had my first live talk again for over 6 months last week, and it was magic, you know, to actually be around the positive energy of other people again, and having these heartfelt conversations, and again, celebrating what comes on the other side of coming together to have these really powerful conversations together. But yeah, they've all evolved, and you know, certainly with the mental adventure, there are some key takeaways I always share towards the end as well. So yeah, more than happy touching on a few of those now, if you wish.
Yeah, I'd love to. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so to frame this, you know, again, the big vision is that, you know, every single one of us out there has three things: the courage, the support, and the safe space to speak up. So, you know, so often, or sometimes in life, you know, we get asked, whether we wish it or not, to provide that support and safe space for other people, whether that's just listening, or actually creating a physical space when we can meet up and actually support somebody who reaches out to us when they're struggling. And so there are 5 key things that I always share if it's our turn to provide that support and safe space for other people. And the first one is really to stop and listen with compassion, curiosity, and empathy. So it's about being fully present, asking leading questions, allowing the other person to speak. Obviously, it is really all about them in those moments. But, you know, stopping and being fully present, you know, putting away the phone and just letting them know that you're safe, you've been seen, and by listening to them, you know, you're soothing them as well. So that's definitely the first one. The second one, offer reassurance and validating their feelings. So I think, you know, the opposite is awful when somebody says, oh, don't be silly, pull your socks up, get on with it, man up. All those things, they don't really help. So, you know, validating their feelings can be hugely powerful, i.e., you know, I'm not surprised you feel this way. These are perfectly normal feelings. You know, what you've been through, it's no surprise that you feel the way that you do. You know, tell me about that. You know, how's it really feeling? So, you know, those leading questions and offering reassurance, and not making them feel silly for the thoughts and the emotions and the challenges that they're facing, for sure.
Yeah.
Reminding the other person that, you know, we always go through chapters. There is always hope, like you touched on at the start. So I think a lot of this is about not being afraid to draw from your own experiences. You know, we all go through challenges in life, and there is always another page to be written. You know, there is always another chapter ahead of us. So, you know, reminding that person that there is always hope. There is always chapter. I'm with you. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. You know, yeah. So really, you know, using your own experiences as well, just to build that empathy and that bond. You know, reminding them that we all go through chapters. Offering your support to find further professional help if they think they need it. So there's an element here of protecting yourself. You know, for me, even now, you know, yes, I've done my mental health first aid training. I'm always trying to level up my skill set, but I'm not a professional counsellor. I'm not a professional therapist. I'm not a professional life coach. And I know my boundaries. And so when it's getting beyond me, me. I'm always saying, look, actually, I think this goes beyond what I can offer you, but I am certainly here to help you to find that further professional support if you think you need it. And there is so much support out there that we know, so many amazing charities doing great work, so many helplines, so many, again, safe spaces for people to get the support they need. So looking after yourself. And the fifth is remembering that most people, most of the time, don't want to be fixed. They just want to be heard. So, again, it goes back to making them feel safe, seen and soothed. So it's not necessarily about fixing the other person. It's just being a great friend and, just letting that person know that, I hear you. I really do hear you and I'm with you. So not necessarily thinking like you've got to fix the other person, but just making them feel heard. And then, the other 5 takeaways, which I'll skim through a bit quicker, which is really the stuff I'm, I guess, most passionate about, which is about finding the courage to speak up when we're suffering. Because we all, again, face those daily battles. So how can we nurture that courage? Or what are some things that we can keep firmly in mind when we're looking to find the courage to speak up about what we're going through? And the first is really to remember that we connect truly as human beings for our weaknesses, not our perfections. That's when we really connect, when we find somewhere to lay down the armor and step into the arena and have these conversations together. That's when we really connect as human beings. So, we connect for our weaknesses, not our perfections. We're never burdening anybody when we reach out for help. I always believe that we're giving the other person a gift. So even with you, Tania, over the past couple of months, there's been times where I've reached out to you and said, do you mind if we just have a chat? I just need to have a chat. And I know that I've, in essence, given you the gift of helping me. Most of us, I do believe, are good people. We want to help other people. And I certainly feel like I've been given a gift when I get the opportunity to help another person, even if it's just with a message, a short WhatsApp reply, or sometimes obviously just a 15-minute telephone conversation or a quick Zoom chat, or ideally meeting up in person. But I do believe we're giving the other person a gift when we find the courage to open up and ask out for help. We already have everything we need within us to be truly happy. And what I mean by this is that when we take the time to shut out the noise, to minimize the distractions, and to listen again to what's truly going on in our hearts, I do think that is the first step really to figuring out how we want to move forward in life as we'd like to. So when I say, I do believe we've got everything within us already, we've got everything we need to be truly happy. What I'm really meaning is our hearts are truly powerful things. And when we really shut out the noise and minimize the distractions to listen to what's going on inside, I do think that's obviously, a really good starting point to move forward in life as we'd like to. Number 4, we'll never know who else will inspire to speak up when we find the courage to speak up ourselves. I think we've touched on that, throughout this whole podcast. It's absolutely huge. And I just see it day in, day out. And we're both lucky enough to be in this space. But, we see it time and time again when we find the courage and speak up about what we're going through. You never, ever know who you'll inspire to speak up. And even from the escape events, Annie, that we've had follow-ups a couple of years on now from people where that event changed their life. That was a one-day event where we just held a space to have this conversation. And a couple of years on, one person who thinks it saved his marriage. Unbelievable. So we never know who will inspire to speak up when we speak up ourselves. And lastly, what if putting ourselves first was in fact one of the most selfless things that we can be doing for other people? I think for me right now, my father to Maxwell, who's coming up to 1.5 years, and he's my reminder that I need to top myself up. I need to take breaks when I need to. I need to take time out of myself and to top myself up and put myself first when I need to, so as I can be the best father to him, the best mental health activist I can be, the best collaborator I can be. So I do believe that putting ourselves first when we need to can be one of the most selfless things that we can be doing for other people. So yeah, there we go. I hope that's offered a bit more sort of tangible outcomes to the whole thing. But yeah, something obviously I'm deeply passionate about, and again, long may it continue with the live talks.
Absolutely. And there's something, so much to be said for that last point you said about it being actually a selfless act, to take care of ourselves. And I really do believe that too, and putting yourself first. Because if you think about it, when you do really take the time to look after yourself, to replenish your energy levels, to figure out what's really important and where you're, honing in on your energy and what you're focusing on to contribute in the world, that has a ripple effect. You're not only being at your best for yourself, but you're being at your best for others around you. And then that, has a powerful effect too. Yeah. Such wonderful takeaways. Thank you so much, Dan, for sharing that. So what would you say to anyone listening to this today if they're thinking, okay, this has been amazing, what's the first thing that I can do now? Like, what's one thing that I can do, or one step I can take to actually moving further towards my purpose?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what I'd say to that is, it's a bit of a loaded answer, but what immediately comes to mind for me is being, what am I trying to say? Being part of the conversation, but hold on, let me just try and frame this the right way.
Take your time.
When I say being part of the conversation, what I mean is when we start a journey of curiosity with our mental well-being, which usually comes from, by the way, taking some time out in nature and just reconnecting with ourselves and committing to putting yourself first. You know, what I then said is engaging with the conversation. So that's led to me being on this podcast with you, Tania, is engaging with this journey of putting our mental well-being ahead of everything else, so as everything else can flourish. And so we've touched on, you know, taking the time out and, you know, really connecting with people like Simon Sinek to discover your why, taking inspiration from whatever you take inspiration from in life. For me, Steve Jobs really helped me to have that conversation with my 100-year-old self, you know, so being part of the conversation and taking ownership over the journey with our mental well-being is huge. And so that's really what I mean about being part of the conversation, because, you know, one podcast episode will have more of an effect on one person than another. You know, it could be a book that changes your life. For me, strangely, it was that moment in the supermarket with the £2 coin which triggered this journey into minimalism. And again, the practice of minimalism for me is hugely beneficial for my mental well-being. So, you know, being part of the conversation and, you know, yeah, there's something which is coming up for me about writing the story of your own life, you know. So, you know, you don't have to let anybody else hold the pen when you're writing the story of your life. And so there's something about, you know, realizing that we can absolutely take ownership over our mental well-being, and there is so much support out there for you to do so. So that's really what I mean, which is about being part of the conversation.
Well, that's wonderful. Such a powerful takeaway to round things off. Thank you so much. And yeah, I guess it's that also what I took from what you just said is that like every day is a new opportunity. Like the fact that you were just in a cereal aisle and that was it, boom, like that insight came to you there and then. So never underestimate the power of what a day can bring for you.
Yeah.
You know? Amazing.
Big time.
Thank you so much, Dan. Again, I'm sure we could just keep talking for ages about this stuff, but it's been so wonderful to speak to you today. How can people follow what you're doing, connect with you if they want to book you for a talk, if they want to follow Are We Okay UK? Tell us how we can keep in touch.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm across any social media channel at I am Dan Keeley, or at Are We Okay UK. So I am Dan Keeley or Are We Okay UK, but please reach out to me. You know, this is what I do. It's the same with you, Tania. I know that you're very open to people reaching out to you the whole time for collaborative projects and just engaging with this hugely powerful space that we're all on together. But, you know, yeah, whether this has resonated with you individually and you are looking for support, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to do that. Whether it's your business or, you know, if you want to work on a collaborative project, this is what I do. So please reach out to me. And then of course with Are We Okay, just keep an eye on the journey. Hopefully in years to come, there will be a local meetup in your local community to come together to have these conversations together. But in the meantime, yeah, the podcast, the live online streams, all of that stuff is alive and kicking. So yeah, make sure to stay in touch, and yeah, please reach out to me. I'd be honored to hear from anybody listening to this.
Fantastic. Watch this space, everyone. Lots of powerful stuff coming from Dan Keeley and his tribe. And yeah, so please do reach out, connect with what Dan and his team are doing. And thank you so much for tuning in today, everybody. I hope that you found a lot of inspiration and some powerful takeaways for today that can serve you today, tomorrow, and every day after. So thank you very much. Connect with you again soon.
Thanks, Tania.
Thanks.